We've got Scott Dixon with us, the complaints resolver, so you can see where he fits into this conversation. Morning, Scott.
Good morning, Kaye.
Good morning. Well, you've heard Peter's story there. Earlier on we heard from Patricia, and she had a situation with, it was actually a private parking company. But interestingly, despite whether it was council or private parking, it kind of feels that it comes down to a bit of a standoff.
It does, and it's worth noting with private parking tickets in Scotland, you're only invited to disclose who the driver is to transfer liability, and there is no keeper liability in Scotland for private parking tickets. And you can safely ignore any one-off tickets because the simple procedure discourages trivial claims for less than £300. And that's why they never pursued Patricia's ticket, because ultimately it wasn't cost-effective for them to do so.
Right. So that's with a private company?
Yeah, that's private parking companies in Scotland. And that's one thing that the trade associations and the parking companies will never tell you, is there is no keeper liability in Scotland for private parking tickets.
So what is keeper liability? I'm not sure what that is.
That's the owner of the vehicle, the keeper of the vehicle. And because they don't know who was driving the vehicle, they invite you to disclose who the driver is to transfer liability. But there isn't, they cannot hold the keeper liable in Scotland. And you can safely ignore any one-off tickets for that reason, because the simple procedure actively discourages trivial claims for less than £300. But don't rack them up, because you do risk being taken to court for multiple tickets.
Right, okay. But if it's a one-off, if you get caught out, if you like, for whatever reason, on a one-off basis, the chances are it will not be pursued.
That's right, yeah. And ignore any debt collector letters, because they have no powers to enforce the alleged debt. They're what's classed as strangers to the debt, and they don't have any powers whatsoever to enforce it. So if you're being harassed by these debt collectors for a private parking ticket, report them to Trade and Standards, because it's unlawful. They don't have any powers whatsoever to enforce it.
Wow. So when it comes to the council then, and, Peter clearly had, he put his hands up and he said, I should have taken that ticket, but I didn't take that ticket, and, ends up paying £100. And there was a whole thing about was the ticket actually in the letter or not. He says, she says, it's Peter's word against the council. What's your situation there? I
would have escalated it to the second stage of the complaints process with the council, because first stage complaints are often rejected regardless, but if you escalate it to the second stage, they're often overturned. And I've done that before with keying errors. A former boss of mine contacted me. He made a keying error on a Ringo app ticket in Edinburgh city centre, and his first stage appeal was rejected. And he contacted me, and I know all the contacts within Edinburgh City Council through LinkedIn. You can find the key contacts for organisations and councils through LinkedIn, and you can guess their email addresses. And I just went down that route and escalated it, and he got it cancelled that way.
But I suppose there is always that threat, as Peter says. I mean, I've never seen a threat of £1,000, but, there is always this threat that if you don't just pay, the money goes up and up and up.
Well, they use these intimidation tactics to coerce you into paying. But if it's not right, it's worth the fight. And if it's unfair, stand your ground and escalate it through the appeals process with council tickets. But with private parking tickets, just safely ignore any one-off tickets, because there is no keeper liability, and the keeper of the vehicle is the owner, and you're only invited to disclose who the driver is. So just ignore any one-off tickets, because the simple procedure actively discourages any trivial claims for less than £300.
Wow. Well, Scott, listen, thank you. I've been saying, this is a grey area, but you've given us very clear lines there. So thank you very much, Scott Dixon, the complaints resolver.